Good morning. This is a special meeting of the Board of Directors of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. May we have roll call, please?
On the roll for the Board of Directors special meeting of May 21st, 2012, Director Avalos, Director Bates, Director Garner, here. Director Gorin, Director Groom, Director Haggerty, Director Hosterman, here. Director Hudson, here. Director Kalra, here. Director Klatt, Director Niss.
And Director Niss is not only here, but wants to welcome you to Santa Clara County, because I'm sure Director Kalra and Director Yeagerdu and so forth, it's nice to have everyone in our county for
we're glad to be here. Yes.
Also my district, I might add.
Director Lee,
It's all true.
Director Marr, Director Miley, Director Pifo,
Here.
Director Rice, Director Ross, here. Director Spearing, Director Wagenknecht,
bring your greetings from Napa.
Director Yeager,
Here.
Director Zane, and Chair Joya.
Here.
We have not yet established a quorum.
Great. I think we had 14 who confirmed to come, and just for so the public's aware, this was originally scheduled as a meeting of our stationary source committee, and then because we also wanted to have members who were not on stationary source attend this meeting as well, we noticed as a special meeting, knowing we were not getting a full board, but in order to allow other board members to come in addition to those who serve on the stationary source. And so we don't need a quorum today. We're not taking any action. We wanted just to get as many board members down, and this has been part of our effort this year of actually holding some of our meetings at or near the site of facilities that we regulate and get tours or presentations as part of this. And before, well, why don't we do a Pledge of Allegiance, and then I'll make a few points about the format of today's meeting. I think our flag is over there, right? Director Niss, since this is your district, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
I would love to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So just a few comments about the format of today's meeting. We are going to have a presentation on the Lehigh Cement Company, and then we will have public comment. And then we will go out by shuttle bus and to the parking lot outside the facility. So we're actually not getting a tour of the facility, but there are some activities in the parking lot, and there will be questions and answers there. And the main purpose is sort of getting a feel for where this facility is located within the community. We know it's not in the city, it's within the unincorporated area of Santa Clara County, surrounded or near Cupertino, so we're getting a sense of the location. And of course, the public is invited to come along and hear and see the same thing that we see, but I want to be very clear, this is not a tour of the facility. In some cases, we get a tour of the facility. This is not. We will be at the parking lot adjacent or outside the facility, and if there's question and answers, the public will be able to hear the same thing that we hear. So I just wanted to clarify that. So the first item is public comment on items not on our agenda, and so I want again, so it's items not on our agenda, and I want to be clear here. I have speaker cards I have look like they're all on item 2. Okay, so there's a couple that don't say what item. Let me go through here. I have one that does not say what item. It says Barry Chang. Are you speaking on item 2 or public comment?
Item number 2.
Okay, and then so let me just ask, does anyone wish to speak on an item which is not on our agenda? Yes. Okay. Pardon? Okay, then please come up. You have 3 minutes. We can't act, but items not on our agenda. And what's your name? Did you fill out a card?
I filled out a card. My name is Kathy Helgerson, and I wanted to speak on both. Please.
Okay.
If that's okay with everybody.
Okay.
I live next door to Apple Computers R&D manufacturing facility for almost 31 years. And there's resin mold emissions coming from these buildings, and they're heating up their prototypes and hiding under trade secrets. As you know, Steve Jobs passed away from cancer, and he was in these buildings for many years, and I believe between his facilities and Lehigh that's probably why he got cancer. I've had it twice. My husband's had cancer. My dog's had cancer. Banley Drive, it's 10475 Banley Drive, and the city of Cupertino allowed them to put in a huge, massive HVAC system there, next door to homes that have children in them, not even 50 feet away. The fire department has gone in there. Apple refuses to tell them what they're going to put in this building. They're still, the 4 thermotron ovens are still there heating up their prototypes. I'm being subjected to resin mold emissions and also all kinds of pollution, chemicals, you name it, coming from these buildings. I have many reports from the fire department about this, and the city of Cupertino refuses to do anything about this and allowed them to put this huge HVAC system in. Bay Area has been out there in 2005 and said it wasn't enough emissions coming from the building. Dianne Feinstein was trying to do something about formaldehyde. It's right next door also to a well that's owned by Cal Water. 58,000 people feed off of this well. There's vanadium in this well now at 7.0 parts per billion. It's been on the rise since 2005 from 3.0, which it was actually 6.5, which is what the city did a test there because I sent a petition around. I need some help here from also Liz, hello? I need some help from you too, to do something about this problem. Bay Area refuses to help me. The Air Resource Board refuses to help me. I've done a lot of work pertaining to these issues. They've replaced the ventilation systems in 5 of Apple's buildings, gutted the buildings, replaced the sewer line. I've done everything imaginable, aside from protesting right there on the curb against this facility that's right next to homes with children in these homes. My son is now 23 years old, and thank God he doesn't have cancer yet, but who knows what's going to happen. My husband and I live next door to this building and are still prone to get cancer. I have diabetes and asthma. I can't breathe. I've walked out of my home and smelled chemicals and almost passed out. Nobody will do anything about this building next door to my home. I beg and plead with you to do something, please. I've never come to you before. I'm not well. I have diabetes also, and I can't walk very well either. I need your help. I need this building. They don't own the building. I need them to move this building away. They're going to build a new building with 2 R&D facilities right next door. I want you to look at that too, because there's homes around that building with children. They tried to put an R&D facility in India, and India threw them out. Thank you for your time. I hope you'll do something about this.
Thank you. That was our public comment. Before I move to consent calendar, let me just, and board members probably heard about this, or so if we can maybe have a moment of silence. A former member for many, many years of our board, my colleague on the Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors, Gail Okama, passed away on Saturday of cancer. So I thought maybe we would just have a moment of silence in her honor. Thank you. Okay. So we have 2 new members here, Director Avalos and Director Haggerty. We just heard public comment. We just started, so we just heard public comment on non-agenda items. So we are now on item 1, which is consent calendar. We have 1 item on consent. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Second.
Motion and second to approve consent. Let's see, do we have our quorum? Yes. You're in time just for the quorum. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Consent is approved. All right, so again, just to state that we will have a presentation, and then I have 10 speaker cards, and then we will go out and we will have a semi-tour. Actually, we will be in the parking lot. We're not getting a tour of the facility, but we will be at the parking lot outside the facility for questions and answers. So we'll start with our presentation, which is an overview of the Lehigh Southwest Cement Company Permanente plant, update on proposed Regulation 9, Rule 13, Portland Cement Manufacturing, tour of Lehigh facility. So I will move. I think I need to move. So, and then we will go to questions and comments after the presentation.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good morning. I'm going to have Jeff McKay give you an overview, and it'll be followed by Mr. Bateman and Mr. Cobb. So let me hand it over to Mr. McKay.
Thank you. Chair Joya, members of the Board of Directors, this morning I'll be giving an introduction to the topic of the Lehigh cement plant current status, and also an overview of the status of Regulation 9, Rule 13 on cement manufacturing. So I'll begin with the background. Our Director of Compliance and Enforcement, Brian Bateman, is very knowledgeable on the regulatory issues surrounding this topic. He'll follow me, and then Robert Cave, our Senior Air Quality Specialist in Rule Development, will go into some detail on the rule. The facility we're discussing today is about 900 acres. It's near the intersection of 280 and 85, just west of the boundary of Cupertino and unincorporated Santa Clara. And the processes that go on there are somewhat illustrated here. It's, of course, a cement plant, and limestone is quarried. Limestone is over 90% of what goes into the kiln here, along with some ores and other materials, and are at high temperature turned into what's called clinker, which is, I think, what will be discussed in some detail later, which is then the primary component mixed with a little bit of gypsum and results in the creation of Portland cement. This plant also does do some crushing of rock to sell as aggregate. So the Air District actually regulates over 10,000 facilities, but this facility is one of only 90 that's considered to be a major facility. And that designation stems from the Clean Air Act, which is about 40 years old, was updated in 1990. And major facilities will have emissions of regulated air pollutants of 100 tons per year or more, or toxics of over 10 tons or more. And these facilities, besides being under the governance of the Clean Air Act, are also required to be provided Title V permits. Now, a point of clarification on Title V permits, they don't add additional limits beyond what other permits add. They aggregate all of the limits and controls related to the facility into one document. These major facilities also are required to perform more compliance certifications than our other facilities. So this includes, for instance, signed statements from high-ranking officials stating compliance. This also includes, beyond the inspection reporting done by regulating agencies, also inspection reporting by the facilities. And we have increased inspection frequency, which in this case means we're there at least every week and often more often. So that's an overview and background. It's a pleasure to be able to continue with Brian Bateman, our Director of Compliance Enforcement, who's very familiar with all the detail of this plan.
Thank you, Jeff, and good morning, members of the board. The first item I'm going to start with is Lehigh's Title V permit renewal status. Title V is a program that comes out of the Clean Air Act. It is actually Title V of the Clean Air Act, and it requires major facilities like Lehigh to have these types of operating permits, which Jeff mentioned, and these are compilations of all the different requirements, air pollution requirements that the facility has to comply with, not just the emission limits and standards, but compliance provisions, how you demonstrate compliance with those limits and standards. These are usually things like monitoring, record-keeping, reporting. So all of this gets brought together in a Title V permit. After the permit is initially issued, they are renewed. Title V permits are renewed on a 5-year basis. And so in 2009, we started a process of renewing Lehigh's Title V permit. In August of 2009, we put a draft permit renewal out, and we had a public hearing, actually right here in this room, in September 2009. And then shortly thereafter, we stopped the process. And the primary reason that we did that is EPA had proposed a rule for cement plants that is called a National Emission Standard for Hazardous Air Pollutants, or NESHAP. Sorry for the acronym, but I'm going to use this, and Robert Cave's also going to be talking about this particular rule because it did some very significant things in terms of additional emission limits for the Lehigh facility. And so this proposed rule took a while for EPA to finalize, but later on in 2010, that rule was finalized. And so in the beginning of 2011, the district reissued that permit and incorporated these new standards that EPA had adopted. And in addition to that, we had used the time to add some other enhancements to the Title V permit. And one of these was an enhanced operations and maintenance plan. Now, this is something that the facility has to have for certain sources that operate under federal rules, and it governs how air pollution control devices at the facility are operated and maintained. And so that was enhanced with additional details. And then another element that we added was a fugitive dust control plan. Now, this covers other sources at the facility that don't have emissions that come out of stacks or intended openings, but are rather fugitive in nature. Haul roads, storage piles are examples of these. So that was another element that we added into the Title V permit renewal. And then after we had done that and responded to all the public comments, the permit was submitted to EPA for review on February 16th of this year. And then EPA only had very minor comments, which we responded to, and now we have issued the Title V permit renewal for Lehigh effective April 17th. So let's talk a little bit more about this EPA rule, this NESHAP. And before I go line for line over this table and the different pollutants that are regulated, let me talk a little bit about what these rules are supposed to do. These are Clean Air Act requirements, and they're for toxics, which EPA calls hazardous air pollutants, or HAPs. And the minimum level of control that is supposed to be set by EPA in these standards for existing sources like Lehigh is supposed to represent the average of the top 12% of sources within the category in the United States. And so that's sort of the base or floor level of control. Now, when EPA had been doing rules like this in the past, up until this point, they had looked at control technology, add-on control devices, operation and maintenance procedures, workplace practice standards, but they really hadn't paid much attention to raw materials, variations that occur from one facility to the next based on the presence or absence of materials of substances in the raw materials. The primary one I'm talking about here is mercury. Mercury is emitted from the cement plants because it's present in the limestone, it's in the rock. And so depending on the geology of the area, you can have relatively low mercury emissions or relatively high mercury emissions. But EPA, up until this point, really hadn't taken that into account when they were setting these standards. But as often happens with EPA rules, there was litigation on this point, and an important ruling by the judge in this case that EPA had to consider variations in raw materials when setting these standards. And so when they amended this NESHAP, that's exactly what they did. And most importantly for mercury, the standard was set for, the average of the top 12% of sources in the U.S. Those are the ones that have lower levels of mercury in the limestone. There really haven't been any, up until recently, any external controls at all used nationally to control mercury. And so before this, EPA had not set any standards for mercury. But now we have this rule. It hasn't gone into effect yet, and it won't until September 9th, 2013. But as I'll cover in upcoming slides, the plant has already put some of these controls in and is controlling mercury and some of these other pollutants that are regulated under standard. Yes, sir.
How many tons of clinker do they produce?
The max that they're allowed to is 1.7 million, and it rarely gets to that point. When the economy is down and construction is down, it's usually under 1 million tons of clinker.
Where is after Robert?
So let's go over these standards, and there are 4 types of pollutants that are regulated specifically by this new rule, starting with mercury. And the standard is 55 pounds of mercury per million tons of clinker produced. So clinker is what comes out of the kiln, which is then ground up and blended with limestone to produce cement. And in the next column shows their current emissions. Now this 69 pounds per million tons of clinker is much less than what the emissions had been, and that does reflect some additional controls that they put in recently, and I'll talk more about that. The emissions without any level of control are closer to 900 pounds per million tons of clinker. So there have been some pretty significant reductions there, and some more that will be coming.
So under this, so the compliance to the 55-pound per million ton clinker is required by September 9th of next year. So that means that between now and then, there need to be improvements or alterations that would actually allow the plant to meet that requirement.
Correct, and it's good to note that because, as will be covered later in this presentation, there is some possibility that EPA is going to push that deadline back. And that's one of the proposals that we have in our district rule, is to put these same standards in our district rule so that we can keep this deadline in place regardless of what EPA does.
So even if EPA moves the deadline back, they would be held to the same date?
If you adopt the proposed rule that we'll put before you later this year. So other hazardous air pollutants that are regulated under this rule, hydrocarbons. Now, not all hydrocarbons are hazardous air pollutants, but the ones that are regulated here. There are 2 forms of the standard. The company can pick one of 2 options. One is just looking at all hydrocarbons, and the standard there is 24 parts per million. Or they can do a little bit more complicated analysis and look at just the organics that are hazardous air pollutants. And if they take that option, the standard is 9 parts per million of what's called organic hazardous air pollutants, or organic HAP. That's the one that we think the facility is going to choose. Source testing now indicates that they meet that standard already.
Did we have a question?
I have a question. I don't know if this is.
It's always on. It's always on, yeah.
So based on a 30-day average.
You want to move your mic up, I think. That's better. Good.
Based on a 30-day average for all of these numbers, are you going to show us any slides that show us the high and the low over a 30-day period so we can understand what the neighborhoods are threatened with or burdened with at any particular time during a 30-day period? I think that would be important to know.
I'm not specifically in this presentation, but we can compile some information and get it to board members later. I would point out that one of the aspects of this rule is that all of these pollutants that you see here have to be monitored continuously with in-stack monitors. Some of those are in place now, but not all of them. But we can get you the data that are available to us in terms of those variations. Particulate matter is used here as a surrogate for those metallic HAPs, hazardous air pollutants, other than mercury. Mercury is sort of unique because it's much more volatile than the others and goes through the control equipment, through the filters, whereas the others can get filtered out. The standard for particulate matter is 0.04 pounds of PM per ton of clinker. Based on available source testing, it appears the facility meets this limit. The last in the row in the table is another pollutant, hydrochloric acid. The standard here in the NESHAPs is 3 ppm, and you can see the current emissions. I have a wide range here. And the reason for that is that the plant operates in a couple different modes, and one of those modes involves operation of what's called a raw mill. This is a big device where the raw material, the limestone, is ground into a fine powder. And when that's done, the hot exhaust gases from the kiln go through that process before they go to their filter. And what happens there is the lime dust acts to actually react with hydrochloric acid and control it. So on the low end, when the raw mills are on, the emissions are well within the standard. However, the raw mills aren't always on. They need to be maintained. About 25% of the time, they're off. And so when the raw mills are off, the hydrochloric acid emissions can be higher. Now, they have put some controls in place to control that, to inject a lime slurry in when the raw mills are off. But there are still some permitting issues that have to be addressed there, not with our permit, but the county's permit, in terms of containment of this lime slurry should there be a spill. And so that's, they're working on that. It's not going to be fully in place until probably September of this year. So those controls are not fully effective. And just to talk about what these controls are, they all fall within a general category called sorbent injection. And so these are materials that are injected into the flue gases, and they either chemically absorb pollutants or physically adsorb them. So there's a couple different materials that are used here. One is this lime slurry that I'm talking about, called hydrated lime. And the other is called activated carbon injection, and that's for mercury. And in order for the mercury controls to really be effective, there's another part of it, which actually was the first phase, phase 1, which they installed in 2010. Mercury is so volatile that it does stick onto the carbon that they inject, but the practice in cement plants, once they filter the ash, the dust out of the emissions before they exhaust it, to put that dust back into the kiln. So there's really no waste emissions here. But with mercury, it's so volatile that none of it will ever, very small amounts actually get into the final product. And so if you don't have a way of removing some of that ash from the process, you're not going to effectively reduce mercury emissions. And so what they've done is put in something called a dust shuttle. And so that takes some of the dust that has the activated carbon with the mercury stuck onto it, and takes it out of the process. It actually goes into the cement, and then as cement is used, it encapsulates the mercury in cement or concrete. And so these are the different types of controls that they're using to comply with this NESHAP. Again, some have been put in and are effective now. Others, in terms of the final limit for mercury, there will be more activated carbon that needs to be injected than what's done now. And again, they're going to have to get that lime injection system, the issues with the county taken care of. It's on schedule to do that so that they can inject a higher concentration of lime and reduce the hydrochloric acid when the raw mills are off. And then, as I mentioned before, the EPA rule, the NESHAP, requires all of the pollutants to be continuously monitored in the stack. And so the facility has had, for a number of years, what we call CEMS, continuous emission monitoring systems, for gases like NOx and SO2 and carbon monoxide. But they have more recently added CEMS for these other hazardous air pollutants, total hydrocarbons, hydrochloric acid, and then carbon dioxide, which isn't toxic but needs to be regulated because of the state's greenhouse gas mandatory reporting regulations, so they can get a good handle on what their CO2 emissions are. And then most recently, a mercury CEMS, which was really sort of a state-of-the-art technology. We don't have any other examples of that in the Bay Area, but they now have mercury CEMS that were added towards the end of last year. Let me turn to another aspect of our regulatory programs, and this is something called the Air Toxics Hotspots Program. This is a statewide program, and it's carried out by the local air districts, but there are other state agencies that are involved in establishing guidelines. And so the Air Resources Board establishes the guidelines for which emission estimates are made in the program. And then another part of Cal EPA, the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, sets the other parts of the guidelines in terms of how risks are calculated. So in terms of Lehigh, They have had a risk assessment in the past, dating back into the 1990s. And this is sort of how the program works. The risk assessments are based on estimating emissions and then doing dispersion modeling analysis so that we can estimate what the air concentrations of different toxics are throughout the community and then estimate exposure and health risks in that way. So it's a dispersion modeling based analysis according to the guidelines. Lehigh is a status, and has been in the past, a status called level 0, and that just means that they are below the risk thresholds for having to reduce their emissions to reduce health risks, and also to stay out of notification requirements, public notification requirements. So historically, the risk assessments for cement kilns and for Lehigh have been based on looking at the kiln, which is the biggest source at the facility. And back around 2010, when we were looking at the comments from the Title V permit, we thought that we really shouldn't be neglecting other sources at the facility because there are other sources of dust, and some of these can have mercury or other metals in them. And so we did a supplemental emissions inventory involving a lot of laboratory analysis of all these different materials. And so we added all of these additional sources into the inventory. Another thing that we noticed at that time is that when we looked at the results of these materials, these analyses, chemical analyses of materials, that what had been used in the past to estimate mercury emissions, according to the CARB guidelines, was a stack test. And it seemed that just looking at the material balances, that something was wrong. And so we established a new method, which is a material balance method, which is more conservative and actually significantly increased the estimates of mercury for the facility. So those two things, a supplemental emissions inventory and a new method to estimate mercury emissions, and those needed to get plugged into a revised health risk assessment. The risk assessment procedures had actually changed from their prior health risk assessment, and so those were updated as well. Some more conservative reference exposure levels, particularly for mercury, and then some age sensitivity factors which have to do with estimating cancer risk, lifetime cancer risk from carcinogens. So all of this got put into an updated risk assessment. That was done and approved by the district in late 2011, and their status is unchanged. They're a level 0 facility, no public notification. We did need to put in a new mercury limit in order to them to be able to keep that status, and that limit now is an enforceable condition, and they have their continuous emissions monitor in there to verify compliance with it.
Chair Joya?
Yes.
Can I just
Dr.
ask
Mark?
a question to Mr. Hilton?
Yes.
I know in the last presentation to the board, there was a map showing a school close by and some community places, and I'm just wondering if the new methods of testing the health risk assessment are looking at the levels at the school or senior centers or other places around the neighborhoods, but if you can go into that a little bit.
Yes, I've got some slides on the air monitoring data coming up.
Okay.
You can defer that just for a second.
Okay.
Just real quick on compliance status. You know, Lehigh is a big facility. They have lots of applicable requirements. They don't have a perfect track record in terms of compliance. Few big facilities do. They've averaged about 5 per year over the last 8 years or so. 22 of the 38 that they've received were emissions related, the others being administrative in nature. The vast majority of them are related to visible emissions from different types of equipment, mostly due to failure of operation and maintenance, that type of thing. And in all cases, the violations were corrected expeditiously, usually just immediately. The particular piece of equipment that was malfunctioning was shut down, certainly within the same day. And the conclusions of our overall compliance review for the Title V permit renewal is there really isn't any ongoing compliance at this point, although there were these violations. For the most part, they occurred at different sources. For those that were at the same source, there were different causes of those violations. So our conclusion was no recurring pattern of violations. And we did recommend this, what I mentioned before, that an operation and maintenance plan enhancement occur along with a fugitive dust control plan.
Chair Joya?
Yes.
Brian, can I just ask you a quick question on that? Can you comment on the number of NOVs at this facility compared to other large facilities that we regulate?
Well, I mean, our refineries are our biggest facilities, and those get the most notice of violations. I would say 3 to 5 times more than this per year, typically. And there are some that get fewer. There are some large facilities that get fewer. Usually those are less complex facilities that don't have as many sources.
Thank you.
So let me just turn here and conclude my presentation with some air monitoring summaries. And so the Air District has done air monitoring at 3 different sites in the community. Number 1 on the map is at an elementary school nearby, and that was focused...
Maybe just for perspective, show where it says Lehigh Cement, where the actual emission sources are.
Okay, yeah, it's right about, the kiln is right about under the small T in cement, I believe.
Okay. That's where the kiln
right,
is.
somewhere around there?
Right.
Okay, and so number 1, the elementary school, that was hexavalent chromium only. Number 2 was at a Baptist church site right off of Stevens Creek, and that was focused on one pollutant, inhalable particulate, PM10. And then the Monte Vista Park site, number 3, which was a very comprehensive and ongoing monitoring effort. And I'm going to talk a little bit about all 3 of these.
Just going back, just so it's clear, the distance between the kiln and the school and the distance between the kiln and the Baptist church.
Well, let's see. The distance between the kiln and number 3, I think, is about 3/4 of a mile. Just for perspective, the school is probably 1.75 miles, the number 1 on the map, approximately.
Okay, thank you.
One more quick question.
Yes.
Thank you. Another question. In terms of the prevailing wind direction, I know there's been concerns in the broader community that these sites may not actually be representative of community impact from the site.
Yeah, we do have meteorological monitoring. There has been some at Lehigh within their facility on a meteorological monitoring tower, and we actually have one of our own at site number 3. The prevailing winds, the wind can blow in any direction at a particular time, but the most common pattern is for flows west to east out of there's sort of a ridge of hills and a gap in it. So west to east out of the gap, and then when they come into the valley, there is veering. And generally they go south, but it can also go north depending on whether it's night or day. Okay, so air monitoring results. First with the elementary school, again, hexavalent chromium only. Monitoring was conducted in conjunction with an EPA program over just over a year. The average concentrations, these are units of nanograms per cubic meter, so it's a billionth of a gram per cubic meter. So what do these mean? Well, you can compare it with some health indices. The chronic reference exposure level for non-cancer risks is much higher than that, 200 nanograms per cubic meter. The lifetime cancer risk was calculated to be 3.4 in a million. These are pretty typical numbers that you would see if you monitor for hexchrome just about anywhere.
So the lifetime inhalation cancer risk is based upon what exposure rate? The chronic reference exposure level?
No, it was based on that if an individual was essentially born at that site and resided at that site nowhere else for 70 years, right, that would be the how much their
based on the average concentration
elevated.
Based on the 0.013 concentration.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay, so nothing too interesting there in terms of hexchrome. Again, we don't monitor hexchrome many other sites, but there is some historical data, and these are pretty typical levels that you might see anywhere in an urban area. At the Baptist Church, this was just inhalable PM10, and it was almost monitoring continuously. A continuous instrument was operated for almost a 2-year period. The average concentration was just about 16 micrograms per cubic meter. The daily max, 55.5. So those are levels within all of the applicable PM10 ambient air quality standards with one exception, and that is the state standard. It's a pretty stringent state standard of 50 micrograms per cubic meter. There were 3 days of monitoring which were over that at the Cupertino site. We did note that many of our other sites in the Bay Area were also above 50 micrograms per cubic meter on those same days. Just a comparison here of that PM10 record, just Cupertino and our next nearest site, which is in downtown San Jose. slightly lower average levels of PM10 at the Cupertino site. And then the Monte Vista Park site. And I mentioned this is a pretty comprehensive site. It's still operating now. What I'm going to show you is the first year of data for some of the various pollutants that you see mentioned on this slide. Starting with ozone. So it's sort of middle of the pack. I should note also in each of these slides, the criteria pollutants, the red line shows the standards. So either a national standard, state standard, or both. These are health-based ambient air quality standards. You can see sort of middle of the pack for ozone, below the standard.
Yeah.
For nitrogen dioxide, sort of middle of the pack towards the lower end, below both the national and state standards. Sulfur dioxide, middle of the pack, but well below the applicable national standard. This is short-term, 1 hour SO2.
Way to go. Way to jump.
Fine PM, so this is PM 2.5, sort of middle of the pack. This particular year of record was below both the national and the state standards. This is for annual average PM 2.5. This is more of the peak fine PM. So these are the 98th percentile of the 24-hour max. You can see Cupertino is really towards the low end and below the national standard. And then for toxics, we really don't have ambient air quality standards, but we can calculate risk like we did in our health risk assessment based on the modeling results. So this is the same sort of approach, but using measured air concentrations for different types of carcinogens. And you can see there's sort of a pattern here that certain pollutants are the biggest risk contributors, cancer risk contributors at all of our sites where we have these data, including Cupertino, diesel PM being the highest, and then several others. Cupertino slightly less than some of these other sites.
So all of these are from the Monte Vista Park air monitoring site?
That's correct. Yeah, 1 year of data, first year of data from Monte Vista. And then for the non-cancer risk comparisons, we really can't make really meaningful comparisons here because some of the main risk drivers for non-cancer risk, we just simply don't have data at other sites. We did do a literature survey here, and we saw that the mercury air concentrations at the Monte Vista site were within ranges that EPA had reported as rural areas. So these impacts are primarily from global transport. So between 1 and 4 billionths of a gram per cubic meter. And we can compare these with the reference exposure levels that OEHA has adopted, both for long-term and short-term exposure, so chronic and acute. This is for inhalation. You can see the measured air concentrations well below the chronic REL and the acute REL. Again, these are inhalation. For non-inhalation exposures, we're not measuring that. We're measuring what's in the air, but we can make some assumptions and calculate what might fall out of the air and affect people in that way. And so we've looked at several non-inhalation pathways for mercury here, calculated an oral dose. Again, it starts with the concentration that we're measuring, make some assumptions, calculate oral dose, and then compare it with the oral reference exposure level. So we're less than that. And that was my final slide. Now I'm going to turn it over to Robert Cave, who's the lead rule developer on our Portland Cement Air District rule.
Director Haggerty?
Thank you. Just real quick, you had mentioned that I think you said they're manufacturing. They're permitted to, under the Title V permitted to do 1.5 million tons of clinker?
1.7 million tons of cement, of which by mass, almost all of it, 95% is clinker, yeah.
Okay, so when they did the Title V permit, did they do their data based on the 1.7? Or because you had mentioned that they're running about 1 million right now, so I'm trying to figure out.
They did a number of different scenarios. The requirements of the program are actually to use actual emissions. So they used actual emissions. There was also some projections in one scenario of what would happen if they went up to full capacity.
Okay, and then I apologize because I really don't know the answer to this question, but and I don't know how you put this into perspective, so I can't understand it. But if you looked at 1 million tons of cement, how many houses is that? I mean, I have no perspective as to what that means.
I don't either, but I think the folks from Lehigh in their presentation can probably answer that question better.
Okay, and then I guess I can ask this question of Lehigh too, because I'm sure you don't know it, but I'll just throw it out there now. I mean, well, let me ask you this. Are there other cement manufacturers in the area?
No, not in the Bay Area, no.
So then are we expecting to see a spike in the amount of cement that is generated out there due to a new stadium being built in Santa Clara?
Probably.
Has the Air District thought about that? Have we, I mean, and again, I don't know if that's only a half a ton.
Yeah.
Well, I do know it's not a half a ton, but, I mean, I don't know what that
Yeah.
means, again, because I don't know.
We haven't at this point. The Air District hasn't, but perhaps Lehigh could.
All right, well, I hope Lehigh addresses that in their discussion.
Okay. All right. The baton is now handed off for the next part of the presentation.
Good morning, Chairperson Joya and members of the board. You've heard a bit about the importance of the Lehigh facility in terms of emissions and its effect on air quality in the region. I'm Robert Cave of the Rural Development Section, and I will be speaking to you about our efforts to set emission standards to meet our clean air objectives and ensure environmental health protections for the surrounding community. I'll be covering what we hope to achieve through the district's rulemaking effort and detail the steps we have taken in that process over the course of our initial draft, public workshop, consideration and response to public comments received, and our current proposal. I'll go over the emission reductions we hope to achieve, the cost considerations of the controls required, and update our direction moving forward on that process. Oops. Great presentation. Thank you.
There you go.
All right, the district is currently out of compliance with federal and state ambient air standards for ozone and particulate. NOx is a precursor to both ground level ozone as well as secondary PM. By setting these emission limits, we intend to make progress towards meeting these federal and state standards. Additionally, the local community has general concerns about fugitive dust, not specifically from the kiln, but from miscellaneous operations at the plant. As for the kiln itself, there are concerns about emissions monitoring and dispersal given the current configuration of the dust control system with 32 stacks located relatively close to ground level. In order to comply with the amended NESHAP, Lehigh has made several modifications to their operations to reduce emissions of hydrochloric acid and mercury, among others, and we expect to achieve emission reductions in NOx and PM in conjunction with these modifications already undertaken or projected for federal compliance. There are two federal rules that apply to the manufacture of Portland cement. The NESHAP, which Brian spoke of earlier, was initially adopted in 1999 and subsequently amended in 2006 and 2010. There's also another rule, the New Source Performance Standard, or NSPS, which sets criteria pollutant emission standards for new, modified, or reconstructed facilities, and has been periodically amended as emission controls and manufacturing processes have improved in the years since its initial adoption in 1971. The most recent proposed amendments to both rules were made final in September of 2010, but as is often the case, the standards were challenged and subsequently litigated in federal court. A settlement was reached in April of this year, the result of which being that come June 15th, EPA will publish a notice of proposed rulemaking that addresses the concerns raised regarding the standards and will either propose a delay of 2 years or merely solicit comments on extending the compliance deadline to 2015. In November of last year, we prepared a draft regulation and workshop report and presented these at a December 12th workshop held in Monte Vista High School here in Cupertino. Several members of the local community included elected officials as well as representatives of the Lehigh facility attended the workshop. Our initial proposal was designed to work in concert with the federal rules and included standards for NOx emissions from the kiln that would represent a 42% reduction from previous levels, along with the emission standards for PM, total organics, mercury, and hydrochloric acid that are consistent with the federal NESHAP standards, using the same compliance date to meet those standards as the federal rule at that time. To address local community concerns about dust, we included a 10% opacity limit for other sources at the facility, and to ensure attainment of that standard, included administrative provisions for the development, submittal, review, and approval of a fugitive dust control plan. We included continuous emission monitoring requirements as in the federal rules and a 300-foot emission stack requirement to better disperse pollutants to ensure that health impacts to the surrounding community remain below the level of significance.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
May I? So how do you measure opacity? And what does 10% really mean?
You use a chart to determine how much blockage of a clear view there is, and that's the Ringelmann standard. And so 100% opacity would be completely, you can't see at all. And then the percentages go down, so 10% is the most stringent standard of facilities, regulatory standard for facilities. This is similar to an opacity standard taken from the South Coast for cement operations down there.
So it sounds like a pretty subjective visual.
They're trained on how to take those measurements, and there's a whole process where you get certified to be able to make those measurements.
Thank you.
Where else in the Bay Area do we do continuous emissions monitoring?
Well, we have
Livermore.
Mr. Chairman, so continuous emission monitoring you'll find on the stacks of most of the major sources. We see them certainly on all the power plants. You'll see them in the refineries and on the different processes in the refineries themselves. Some of the chemical plants have CEMs. It's a tool we use oftentimes as part of our enforcement efforts, but for the most part, it's something that we have.
So each of the 5 refineries have some continuous emissions monitoring on some of their stacks.
Correct. It kind of varies depending on the facility, which process has the semi.
So at the workshop, we received written comments from Lehigh Southwest Cement Company, concerned members of the public, local and regional environmental organizations, and elected officials, including letters from the mayors of the cities of Cupertino, Los Altos, and Los Altos Hills. As a reminder, the NSPS applies to new facilities, and the NESHAP has 2 separate sets of emission standards, one for new facilities and one for existing facilities. We received numerous requests to incorporate the emission standards for new facilities into the rule, as they represent the maximum feasible controls and in consideration of the local location of the facility near a populated area. Conversely, Lehigh requested that we either remove from the rule the toxic air contaminant standards or adopt the NESHAP by reference, because they feel that more stringent requirements than what is applied at other cement facilities may impose an unfair disadvantage to their business. We have evaluated the costs associated with the proposed emission standards and found that they represent the maximum that can be achieved in a cost-effective manner. The costs associated with these controls, when they can be integrated to the design and construction of a new facility, is far different from when they are added onto one that is already existing. The inclusion of the NESHAP toxic air contaminant standards, in addition to the emission stack requirements that I will speak to in a moment, ensure public health protections for the nearby community. Protection of the public health was behind our initial proposal of the 300-foot stack, but this requirement may prove to be too specific and unwieldy for the facility to execute, given local permitting, aesthetic issues, and engineering constraints. To remedy this, we are allowing for alternative stack configurations to that originally proposed, but these must be constructed so that the health risks to the surrounding community remain less than significant, even assuming Lehigh returns to their maximum permitted operating capacity. In order to improve the enforceability and transparency of the Fugitive Dust Control Plan, we removed the requirements addressing the formulation, submittal, review, and approval of the plan, and replaced these requirements with the actual dust mitigation and control requirements taken from the Fugitive Dust Control Plan that was required as part of the Title V permit. Several commenters requested greater access to emissions information from the facility, with some envisioning CEM data reported on the internet similar to what is provided at some weather websites. Others requested access to all data so that they could help the district in analyzing this information. We agree with the spirit of these comments. We want to do everything we can to provide information to the public, but there are specific challenges when it comes to CEM data. Obtaining emission information from the extreme environment of the cement kiln is far different from doing so at an ambient air monitoring station, much less one for local meteorological conditions. Readings are taken every minute. First, the data must be reviewed and verified for accuracy. Second, it does not by itself indicate compliance because the standards are based on rolling averages tied to production levels. And third, the data does not correspond simply to the concentrations in the air that we breathe. This issue is not unique to this facility, and the district is working with Lehigh as well as others required to use CEMs to provide the data in a condensed, uniform format so that access can be made more readily available to the public. We do provide real-time ambient air monitoring data on our website, as you can see on this slide. This is a screen grab from our site providing data for the Monte Vista Park Station. Probably too small to read. You can find this information on our website, and you can look up any of the stations in our air monitoring network. I'm not going to repeat that long website address at the bottom, but just go to BAAQMD.gov and search for air monitoring. So to summarize the changes from our previous proposal made available at the workshop, we have retained the emission standards for toxic air contaminants and NOx, along with an ammonia standard to ensure that the NOx controls are operated such that they do not result in adverse impacts from secondary emissions. We are also retaining the 2013 effective date for these controls. We have removed the specificity of the 300-foot stack, but retained the analysis and demonstration requirements in order to ensure health protections to the surrounding community. All emission points from the kiln and clinker cooler must be continuously monitored as we have proposed previously. And we have incorporated the fugitive dust mitigation and control elements of the fugitive dust control plan into the rule itself. The expected emission reductions from the proposed rule are listed on this slide. Just to remind you, the cement kiln at Lehigh Permanente is currently the largest source of NOx emissions in the district without modern add-on controls. The middle column shows the current emissions of the regulated pollutants, and the third column shows the emission reductions resulting from the proposed rule. These apply to the cement kiln and do not include the PM emissions reductions we expect from miscellaneous sources through the control and mitigation elements drawn from the fugitive dust control plan. In addition to the emission reduction, staff has analyzed the costs associated with this rulemaking effort. As Brian Bateman indicated, the control equipment for toxic emissions have been installed for the most part, and Lehigh has planned further modifications to their facility in order to accommodate the continuous monitoring requirements in a manner that minimizes costs. Operation of this control and monitoring equipment incurs an annual cost of $2 to $3 million just for the HABs. The costs associated with the NOx standards would be $2.3 million with an annual operating cost of $900,000. Lehigh previously estimated the cost of a 300-foot stack at $2.5 million, and this remains a reasonable estimate for the costs associated with whatever modifications that they undertake to comply with the rule. As part of our final proposal, you will receive a complete analysis of the cost of control, their cost effectiveness, and their impact on the facility and the greater region. And we will be finalizing that proposal later this summer, making it available for public comment, the proposed rule language, the staff report, the socioeconomic and environmental analyses, and bringing this to you for your consideration at a public hearing in September.
Okay. So next we have a presentation from Lehigh Cement, and then we'll go to more questions and public comments. Director Garner?
Thank you. Going back to slide 31, where you're talking about the staff requirements and the configuration ensures health protection. as demonstrated by HRA. Can you talk a little more about that?
Well, as Brian indicated, there was an updated health risk assessment undertaken, and it looked at what the risks for the facility were currently at their current production levels, which is about half capacity, and then looked at what would happen when should they return to full capacity. And that's where, for that scenario, they proposed a 300-foot stack, and we ran the analysis and found that that would keep them below the levels of notification required as part of the air toxic hotspots program. But putting that was in our original proposal, a 300-foot stack, and the facility has indicated that may be difficult to execute, and so we've retained the same reasons for that 300-foot stack in the health risk assessment demonstration, and meeting the same triggers of less than significant emissions, but it doesn't have to be a 300-foot stack. They'll come up with a design, we'll do the analysis based on that design and have it demonstrated that it meets the same objectives.
Are they still looking at a single stack?
They may have more than one stack. They're required to do continuous emission monitorings for every emission point, so it just makes more sense economically to have less stacks, so you're not having multiple continuous emission monitoring and reporting requirements for those.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, members of the public, first of all, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity today to present our facility, represent us. My name is Axel Konrads. I'm the Vice President, Cement Operation for Lehigh Hansen Region West. And I also would like to introduce my President, Teresa Ragusa, our Director of Land Usage.
And if you stay with the mic, that way.
I will.
Good.
Certainly. As well as my co-speaker today, our Director of Environmental Affairs for North America, Timothy Metz. Before we go into more details on cement production in our facility, I want to give you a little bit a glimpse of our product. This is what we're all here for. And our product is cement. This is what we believe is the product for sustainable construction. The word cement is actually based on the Latin word cementum. So you see it's not a new product, it's actually a very rich traditional product. Cement is a mineral binder and it is used in the production of concrete and mortar. Cement production uses natural occurring raw materials and has been used for thousands of years already. And I think one of these very specific landmarks that show the durability and sustainability of our product is the Pantheon that you can visit in Rome, which is more than 2,000 years old. But cement still is a very modern product too, that we benefit every day for. One, I think, of the great current examples in our region here is the Bay Bridge that is currently constructed majorly out of concrete. The production of cement has more or less 8 major production steps. The first one is mining of the limestone in our quarry. The second one is for quality improvement to blend the limestone. And we heard it before in the presentation. Then the limestone with the other ingredients has to be ground and dried at the same time. We can use excess heat from the kiln to make that process even more environmental friendly and has less heat consumption for that. The fine raw meal is then blend again for optimal quality again and is then introduced to our heart of the plant, the kiln. We have a state-of-the-art kiln that actually burns the material to get these unique minerals that make our quality of our cement so high. The clinker, the intermediate product clinker, is then cooled and quenched down quickly and goes to the final production step, the finish grinding, where it's ground to the fine powder, which is then finally loaded and shipped, and we can either pick it up in Home Depot or it's going to huge construction sites. Permanente has a rich tradition and a rich history. Actually, quarrying began in 1906. In 1939, Henry Kaiser built the first initial cement plant, and he expanded that in 1945 to 6 kiln operation, wet kiln operation at that time. And at that time, actually Permanente was the world's biggest cement plant worldwide. In 1981, he invested in a state-of-the-art kiln line that is still state-of-the-art when it comes to environmental friendliness and heat consumption efficiency. And that plant is still existing nowadays, so we have 1 kiln now. In 1986, that plant was sold to Hansen, and Hansen just continued doing the right thing to invest in high efficiency and lower consumption and better environmental protection with looking at the finish grinding side, investing in a high efficiency grinding technology. In 2007, Heidelberg Cement, our parent company, acquired Hansen, and since then Permanente is part of the Heidelberg Cement Lehigh family.
How does the size of this plant compare now to the size of other cement plants? I know there's no other ones in the Bay Area, but generally of other cement plants, how is this size compared?
I would say it's a mid-sized plant.
Pardon?
A mid-sized plant.
It's considered mid-sized compared to other cement plants.
Right. So we see Permanente as a local plant for a local business. We just heard that Permanente plant is the only cement plant located in the Bay Area. And coming to your question back, the plant actually supplies 72% of the cement needs in Santa Clara County and more than 50% of the greater Bay Area. Permanente products are used for infrastructure projects, schools, hospitals, homes, business, and Permanente products helped even great landmarks like the Shasta Dam or currently the Bay Bridge. At this time, I would like to hand over to my co-speaker, Timothy Metz.
Thank you, Axel. Good morning to the board. And Henrik is right. It is right in the middle as far as capacity. The largest in North America as far as clinker production is in St. Louis, our competitor, Holcim, and that's a 4.4 million ton plant. And about the smallest in the gray cement area is about 500, 600,000. So we're this Permanente plant is right in the middle. All right, Henrik had mentioned that we, Lehigh Cement Company, is part of the Heidelberg Cement Group, and we have plants worldwide. And what this does for us is it gives us a knowledge base, a knowledge transfer from all over the world as far as pollution abatement and pollution control. Heidelberg Cement is a founding member of the Cement Sustainability Initiative, and that's a voluntary effort to protect the environment and be as good a neighbor as we can be wherever we operate. 3 key initiatives, 3 key pillars of the Cement Sustainability Initiative is social responsibility, emissions reduction, and responsible quarry reclamation, and I could say that the Permanente facility excels in all 3 of those. The cement industry and the Permanente plant in specific is very highly regulated. We're a very highly regulated industry. There are layers upon layers of compliance assurance and enforcement, starting with the federal US EPA out of Washington, D.C., and then the country is broken up into different EPA regions. Region 9 is right here in San Francisco. Then you have state control with the California Air Resources Board and the Regional Water Quality Board for water issues. And then you have the local control and enforcement and compliance, which is the Bay Area Air District for air, and also Santa Clara County, which does our mining issues and building permits. So a lot of layers of enforcement and compliance assurance. The Title V permit, you've heard from Mr. Bateman. I just want to point out a few takeaways from this slide. One being 94 individual emission sources. That's quite a big plant, quite a big number. Most of those individual sources had their own permit, and what Title V did was take all those permits and put them into one document. And so that one document now has over 1,500 conditions. And I point out the last bullet there, instantaneous reporting requirement. If we have a malfunction, we are required to instantaneously report that as soon as possible to the Bay Area Air District and of course, take appropriate actions. You've heard also about the local monitoring studies. The online real-time data is available from the Monte Vista Air Monitoring Station. And EPA, you heard also this morning that they did the hexavalent chromium study at Stevens Creek, which showed no further action required, and also showed that there was no harm as far as hexavalent chromium to the elementary school children there and their staff. All right, you've heard about the national emission standards and hazardous air pollutants for our industry. This, of course, is the big environmental air rule that's coming down the pike for us for September of 2013. And that's the compliance deadline on 2013, and those are the four standards that we'll have to comply with: mercury, total hydrocarbon, particulate matter, and hydrochloric acid. Here I want to point out, it's a busy slide. Let's see if I can get this. In the second to the, if you go over, this column right here, and then the last one right here, is the existing source emission limits for our industry and Permanente, and that last column is a comparison to the European Union and their standards. And you can see mercury at 11 micrograms per normal cubic meter is well below the European Union standard of 50. And so, you know, a lot of us think that the Europeans are way ahead in the world as far as environmental control and regulations. 3 of those 4 pollutants are more stringent than the European Union. All right, so how will we comply with the NESHAP rule? Was mentioned briefly, as far as mercury, we'll do some dust shuttling along with the activated carbon injection. For total hydrocarbons, we're still looking at that, but preliminary testing results show that we can comply with that limit. Hydrochloric acid will be the lime injection once that system gets up and running, as Brian mentioned, in probably around September. And particulate matter we already meet. We have a bag house on the main stack that is the best bags that money can buy, the best technology out there. And so all 4 of those pollutants require a continuous emission monitor, and the best way to do that is to put them on a single stack. All right, you also heard this morning about health risk assessment. The numerous health risk assessments have been done over the past 3-4 years. The Bay Area Air District does those, not Lehigh. And we supply some of the data tested by third-party consultants. And so the Bay Area takes that data and does the health risk assessment. And as Mr. Bateman pointed out, we've always been at level 0, no further action required, no notification. All right, Robert Cave has talked about the new cement rule coming from the Bay Area Air District. And I just want to point out that the Permanente facility is an existing source. And the way you derived at that being an existing source is you look at the Clean Air Act. And the definition of an existing source actually refers you to any affected source that is not a new source. So you have to look at the definition of what is a new source under the Clean Air Act. And under the Clean Air Act, it's any affected source that the construction or reconstruction, which is commenced after the administrator files a proposed rule that affects that source. And so relevant for this case is the NESHAP filing of that rule, and relative to this case, to the Permanente plant, is September 9th, 2009. And so no construction or reconstruction has taken place after September 9th, 2009, and therefore this plant is an existing source and not a new source. And as Robert also indicated, we did, Lehigh Hansen did submit comments, and one of our main comments was to align it with the federal NESHAP standard so that this facility is not singled out throughout the country as being the only facility that would have to comply earlier or with tougher standards if they change, and which would put us at a significant competitive disadvantage. All right, I'll turn this back over to Axel.
Okay, I think by now you saw in both presentations, priority number one for us is environmental stewardship. And we saw already a couple of things that were done. We are a state-of-the-art, low energy consumption, low emission production facility, and that is implemented throughout the whole plant. We did mercury emission reduction already, and we reduced by 90% already. And as a matter of fact, Lehigh Cement is a pioneer in North American industry with mercury reduction technology. We were the first to implement that in North America. We also are actively investing in the hydrated lime injection. That's well on the way. We will be finished by September, and that will reduce further detached plume. And we just recently announced our active partnership in greenhouse gas emission reduction technology with a new cutting-edge biotechnology firm, Oak Bio. So I think we can be very proud to say that Permanente proactively invested and is ahead of the compliance schedule on the majority of the emissions. It's not only environmental stewardship, it's also community relation and involvement in the community that is really near and dear to us. And there are a lot of things we are doing. First of all, we want to inform about real facts. This is the reason we have the Lehigh Permanente Community Council that is formed in 2009 and meets 5 to 6 times per year. Next to that, we also want to have a bigger distribution of our key notes. So we have a newsletter for that, which is also published 5 times per year. And that is actually sent out to 24,000 households in Cupertino, as well as in parts of Los Altos and Los Altos Hills. We also want to be involved. So Lehigh employees are very active on boards and committees. Part of that's Chamber of Commerce, Silicon Valley Leadership Group, Rotary, High School Foundation, just to mention a couple of them. We want to be as transparent as we can, so we offer plant tours. So while we have not the opportunity with this big group to be in the plant here to really make a detailed plant tour, we offer that, and we did that very successfully with schools, starting with elementary schools up to universities. They are very interested in our state-of-the-art production facility.
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as to the cement plant tours, schools, elementary to university, community groups, et cetera, we're being invited to ask additional questions in the parking lot.
Absolutely.
Would it be possible for us to actually see the plant? I mean, I'd like to see what that mercury reduction system looks like.
We will not have the opportunity to go inside of the plant today just because of the size of the group today, but we will have some good displays that you see in the background the plant and the major facilities.
Also, I think, if I can, Director Husterman, we purposely notified this meeting to be more of a meeting in the parking lot so you can see the facility, rather than to actually take a tour of the facility. This is a public meeting. We'd have to afford everyone from the public to do the same. Just didn't think we wanted to put this company into that situation. So instead, it's notified. It's in a situation where you'll be in the parking lot. You'll be able to see the facility. We'll point out some of the equipment as we sit in the parking lot itself. And if any individual board member wants to have a separate tour, we can certainly talk to the representatives of Lehigh and set that up separately.
Absolutely. So I think we can conclude.
I mean, it took me an hour to get here this morning. I would have loved to have been able to see all the great stuff you're talking about up close and personal, but apparently the best we're going to get is the parking lot. So thank you.
You will have the opportunity to a different date, at a different time, to absolutely do that. That's how we do it. And sorry if there's any confusion on what the setup for today was supposed to be, but this is always what was intended for today. Okay. Was it your question?
Yep. And if we can try to wrap up, because I want to go make sure we hear from the public and then go and have a chance to at least be in the parking lot. So,
right.
Yeah. Director Pifo?
Just a quick question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Axel, thank you for the presentation. Can you give me an idea of the specifics of the local operation, how many employees you have, the workforce you're employing locally, what your annual revenue is, if you can share that, because I'm trying to compare the annual revenue to the slide 33 presentation we had previously on the cost to implement NESHAP standards and the NOx standards and then the annual implementation.
You will understand that we will not give out financial data at this time. That's clear. I can freely share with you, we have direct employees, 158 employees with us. By this time, I don't want to share any financial data with you.
No problem. But I'm trying to get a feel for the cost versus your revenue and those financial impacts. So if there's some way to express that, I'm certainly open to that.
It is a major cost item for us, no question about that. This is what it is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to summarize, Lehigh Permanente plant has a long history and a bright future to continue to serve the communities of the Bay Area with our products. I think you felt that stakeholder engagement, community relations, and environmental stewardships are our priority. As said, we have a state-of-the-art production facility in both minimized natural resource usage as well as energy usage. We are a pioneer in emission reduction and environmental production technology. We are very actively involved in the community. And last but not least, we provide a quality product for the future development of our country. Thank you very much.
Chair, go ahead.
Thank you. I think so. We're done with the slides right now. Right?
Hey, John.
Director Garner.
Thank you.
Director,
sorry.
Garner and Director Niss. Yes.
Okay, I have two questions. One is regarding construction or reconstruction projects. This facility is still an active open pit mine. So how do you define construction or reconstruction?
Construction of a greenfield new facility is exactly what it means. It's a brand new facility. This facility has been here for a long time. Reconstruction is a specific definition in the Clean Air Act, which is if you construct, take for example the kiln, 50% of the cost to build a new kiln is considered 50% or more of the cost to build a brand new kiln is considered reconstruction.
Okay.
None of those meet the requirement to be a new facility for this plant. It's an existing source.
We agree.
You concur, Jack?
Right. I believe the issue we're talking about is the applicability of the NSPS standard. Is that what's at the bottom line, right? And we agree that the staff's position is that we don't believe the NSPS applies.
Okay. And then the other question I had was on the term detached plume. What does that mean?
A detached plume is it happens in certain meteorological conditions. So usually like a very cool morning, a lot of dew in the area, and so a detached plume is when like opacity forms. It's aerosols mainly that form after the stack. So you have if this facility had a single stack, there would be a gap between the top of the stack and where this plume forms. Okay, we are abating that issue with the lime injection.
Okay, thank you.
Director Niss.
Could I make one comment, which may sound like an advertisement, but having lived in this now for going on 12 years, your cement is touted literally throughout this area, but also throughout the country. You're pushed up against other cement production from other areas of California, the country, and the world. I just wanted you to have a minute to comment on that quality, the fact that it's used extensively in this area, and it seems as though you ought to have a minute to do a quick ad.
And then after that, what we're going to do is go to public comment, because we really don't want to lose some folks in the parking lot, where we can continue to have some questions in the parking lot, and I'll talk a bit more about the future public comment schedule.
I think, thank you very much.
It can be very short.
Thank you very much. First of all, I think it's outstanding that we have a very high efficient production facility where we really have a minimum of usage of fuel and energy that others can use to provide our product. Our raw materials are of that kind that the quality of our cement is superior to other products just because our raw material base is that good. So that's also the reason that we can use that much own domestic product out of our quarry to produce that cement. And that makes the huge advantage for the Permanente cement compared to competitors. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So before I turn to public comment, let me say that there will be additional public comment with regard to the proposed new cement rule, which the Air District will be adopting, which will cover this facility. And there will be a public hearing in September. Is there one in July, Jack? Just to be clear for the public.
So, Mr. Chairman, the staff right now is on course to bring this proposal to you for your consideration in September. Henry, is it the first or the second meeting? Probably the second. The second meeting in September, and Mr. Chairman, I'll find that date for you here shortly.
So there will be additional opportunity for public comment once also the draft of the rule is out, the next draft. I want to just assure everyone there will be an opportunity.
So September 19th is the board meeting, but you're right, there'll be an opportunity for public comment on the proposal still between now and then.
Right. Okay. All right. At this time, I have 10 speaker cards. So in order to allow us the time to be able to get folks who want to go out to the parking lot, and again, it sounds like any member of the Air District Board can take advantage of going to the facility, specifically in a group that's less than a quorum, it sounds like, to be able to get a tour and see firsthand some of these issues before the rule is adopted.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and we will put that inquiry out, and any board member that asks, will set that tour up with the representatives of Lehigh.
So I'm going to ask everyone will have 2 minutes to speak, and so that's about 20 minutes. That should take us up till noon, so that folks can plan. And then there's shuttles out for the public and those on the board who wish to go. So I'll call the first name, and the second individual can be ready so we can get through them as quickly as possible. So 2 minutes per speaker. Rod, looks like Sinks, followed by Barry Chang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I respectfully request that Dr. Gary Latshaw be allowed to present first, because my presentation follows his.
2 minutes? Well, we don't. All right, so go ahead. Why don't you come up real quickly? Can you come up?
Last night I was up to 2 o'clock making 10 pamphlets. They're over there.
We've got it, so everybody will get a copy of it.
Okay.
Good.
I'd like to basically emphasize 3 pollutants from the plants: nitrogen oxide, sulfur dioxide, and particulates.
Yeah, speaking of the mic, please.
I'd like to emphasize 3 pollutants from the plant: nitrogen oxide, sulfur dioxide, and particulates. Using the Air Resources Board own report, there's hundreds of millions of dollars associated over 10 years of these pollutants. I'll hold this up. The far initial one is 2010, if it were at full production. The NESHAP rules which are being proposed to be applied has about a 10% reduction in the over these $500,000 of expenses in healthcare. The NSPS, the EPAs for new and modified, and you have the authority, you absolutely have the authority to impose more restrictive measures than anything that actually the EPA writes, as long as it's more restrictive. So that shows about 60% reduction. I think even further reduction is possible. To go through them, sulfur dioxide, the current proposals does not cause any reduction in sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide, based on the cost analysis, the health cost, is the most significant health impact to the community. The last page of when you get this is actually from a Florida report, which indicates what other regulations have been able to do in 2007, 5 years ago. Okay, 5 years ago there was probably not much of a Facebook either. I really don't care what happens in the rest of the country. So this shows a factor of 6 is possible with SO2 improvement. NOx is at least a factor of 2, and that's proven by this 2007 publication. Particulates, this is the most egregious. You're proposing 0.04 limit. They were at 0.014 in 2010. So if we want to do that, then let's let the speed limit go to 100 miles an hour and ask that everybody else
And
drive
everybody
65.
will get a copy of this, as well as our staff, so that we can also get any comments on any of the issues you raise here.
Thank you.
Thank
the
you.
CD has all
And we
the...
have a CD, yes. All right,
Thank you.
Rod Sinks, followed by Barry Chang. And again, we have to hold everyone to 2 minutes because we want to get out there. This is not the last public comment. This was meant to be able to be here, go down to see the location, and there will be additional opportunity for public comment. Rod Sinks, followed by Barry Chang.
Thank you. I'm Rod Sinks. I'm a city council member from Cupertino, but I'm here speaking as an individual rather than as a representative of the city. So welcome to Cupertino. Thank you very much for coming. Welcome to this key part of Silicon Valley where we take pride in having built a major economic engine for the world, based largely on attracting the best minds from around the world. We need to keep Silicon Valley residents' minds and their lungs healthy to stay competitive. As you go through the process of determining what regulations to apply to the cement plant upwind of Silicon Valley, note that the city councils of Cupertino and Los Altos Hills have both weighed in, asking you to consider more stringent regulation than the draft prepared by staff. I ask you to review Dr. Latshaw's report and help all of us by asking staff to prepare and publish answers to the following questions. Number one, is Dr. Latshaw's analysis accurate? If not, can staff refine it or correct it so we all have an accurate assessment? Two, who should be paying this large health care cost? Three, if the numbers are right, the draft standard seems to bring down costs a very minor fraction from what they are today at full production, from $620 million to $570 million. And why is PM 2.5 requirement more lenient than current? Four, if SO2 emissions are such a significant health component cost, why does the draft standard not regulate it? Five, why not require state-of-the-art control using maximum feasible technology? Six, if Lehigh or Air Board staff claim costs are too high to get maximum feasible technology put in place, what are the financials? Specifically, what are the capital costs, and how much would the price of cement rise in the Bay Area with the Air Board's proposal versus these alternative proposals? Can and will the Air Board quantify the health effects of heavy metal pollutants, particularly mercury and chromium, as Dr. Latshaw has done for the other components?
If I could just ask you to wrap up.
Thank you. Our health is in your hands. We think publishing these answers will let everybody participate. Please come back to Cupertino for your September public hearing.
Thank you very much. Barry Chang, followed by Michelle Bazargan. I apologize.
Honorable Board, my name is Barry Chen. I'm a Cupertino City Council member, like Rod, but I'm here for myself and for the group called Bay Area for Clean Environment. I'm here to tell you, yes, Lehigh was saying they sell 72% of the product to Santa Clara County, 50% to the entire Bay region. Yes, but that's under the unfair business practice. They're in violation of the state mining law. They're supposed to be removed from AB 3098 list. And that's why other competitors cannot come in. If you have the chance, at the last meeting I went to San Francisco, my understanding you guys are going to visit the plant. And I went in there, okay, when I got elected, in a couple months they invited me there, inside the room, the computer room, they look at the crater, that big mining. That's where the violation is. That's where they're dumping the illegal selenium water, million gallon to the creek and poisoning all of us here. Okay, besides that, as you heard Robert say, this is the largest nitrogen oxides. No add-on control. That means the whole entire Bay region, as you know, is not meet the federal and state ambient air requirement. That means all the air is here is harmful to all of us in the environment. And you have friends die in cancer. The fact is there's quite a lot of people die and die prematurely. As what Dr. Leshaw mentioned about this, the health care cost will be 50 to 60 million a year. To answer your question, how much their revenue, they won't say that. I have some information. About $2 million sales tax to Santa Clara County. The city, we get zero. All the city here, we get zero. But we get this polluted. And pollution on our people, kill the people earlier. I mean, look at Steve Jobs. Died at 56. Of course, I cannot say he died because of that, but I think there's some reason in there. This area also has some fact. The autism rate in the Cupertino School District is higher, one of the highest in the state. Okay, and then the mercury in the reservoir is high. Okay, look at all this fact. They say the mercury coming from...
Thank you very much, Councilmember.
I'll be finished one sentence. Okay, they say the mercury could come from China, but no one wants to look at the mercury coming from this cement plant, which is ridiculous. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle, I apologize on the pronunciation of the last name. I have a difficult last name, so I appreciate that. Followed by Bill Allman.
Hi, my name is Michelle Bazargan. I'm a resident of Cupertino. I live 2 miles away from Lehigh Cement Factory. Every day we cannot open our windows. There's dust, the cement dust all over the place. Our cars are covered by cement. Inside, I have to dust every day, and it's really, really frustrating, and that obviously affects our lives. And it seems to me all of their equipment keep they're not working, failing, and there's no monitoring. Anyone's there to monitor their equipment. Meanwhile, we're getting drinking and eating pollution. And why there's a government official give them 2 more years of delay for their failures. And then I live in Cupertino, and I see them monitoring a station every day. I pass by there. And in my opinion, it's not effective, and it's not getting the correct air to monitor. There is no airflow. It's right behind the building, right behind the trees. And that's only one station in Cupertino. And most of the time is off. I'm not sure how we get a correct reading. And then basically, I'm really disappointed on public officials, especially EPA, that these things keep going on, and there's no one standing up and speaking for public. Basically, they're polluting air, water, and everything. So, just please, we're looking in your hand, basically, to help us out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bill Allman, followed by Tim Brand. Here's what I would do, just, leave it with Sean, and he'll make sure we get that. Thanks.
I'm Bill Allman. I'm the founder of Quarry No. We have 500 members in Cupertino, Los Altos Hills, Sunnyvale, Saratoga. I would like to thank you all for being here. However, we're very concerned, and that's why we are here. I think the few of us that are here are the only people that have not been paid to be here. I was stunned, though, when we started to hear that Gail Ultimo passed away. She was an outstanding person and made a very significant point to me as to the challenge that we all have. I mean Lehigh, I mean us, I mean the Air District. We have a major pollutant in a residential area. The pollution will increase as the production increases. The restrictions, the regulation will increase as we learn more about health. That gives us a big challenge. The fact sheet, I want to talk about the fact sheet. You all can pick up a fact sheet over on the counter. The fact sheet demonstrates that the Air District runs interference for Lehigh. I put 10 items on there that are factual. Mr. Broadbent, at the last meeting of the stationary source, said they were all incorrect. They are not. They are based upon air quality district data, and they should be in the fact sheet. The omissions are not helpful to any of us, be it Lehigh, be it the residents, be in the air district. There has been comment made about the savings that could be done with additional effort. I would only call to your attention another air district study that you all sat through on PM Health. $3 billion to be saved in Santa Clara County alone on PM 2.5 coming from diesel trucks, many of which are used by Lehigh. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim Brand, followed by Dennis Aka.
Hi, I'm Tim Brand. The health risk assessment and all the monitoring data does not replace stack measurements. We want a central stack. We've been asking for it for a long time. We were promised a central stack. I'm really disappointed to hear waffling on it here today. All these other things, the health risk assessment and whatnot, all depend on the weather and politicized toxicity measurements. We deserve to know what comes out of their plant with stack measurements. The central stack is critical for that. I heard Lehigh talking about, in their slide, they said they were going to have a central stack. I heard the Air District say maybe they weren't. We want a legitimate central stack installed. Secondly, I want to talk about the mercury. Lehigh today said that they're one of the first to install mercury control equipment. Well, Mr. Bateman explained today that the fabric filters, which contain lime, capture the mercury. And if you look at the EPA website and just put in a search box the initial CKD, cement kiln dust, you will see that other cement plants around the country for decades were removing that as solid waste, and this company decided to recirculate it so that they wouldn't have to pay for solid waste removal. And now, although I agree it's better to put it in the product than it is to put it in the air, they have decided to put their mercury into the product so they can avoid solid waste disposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we want
Dennis?
proactive, may I add. We want proactive. And yet, at the press release for their Phase 1 mercury reduction program, we had one of the board members of the Air District here get up and talk about how proactive that was. They bought into this lie from Lehigh that they were the first to do this and how proactive it is. It wasn't. We want proactive, and we want the tighter air restrictions. We deserve that. This plant is right next to the crowded metropolitan area, unlike any other plant in the country.
Thank you. Dennis, is it Acha, followed by Rhoda Fry?
Dennis Acha. Yeah, thank you. Good morning.
Dennis, yes.
My name is Dennis. I'm from Breathe, California. Breathe, California supports cement production as long as the public health is strongly considered and appropriate and effective measures are put in place and adhered to. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Rhoda Fry, followed by Karen Del Compari.
The Monte Vista data that you're getting is misleading. Everybody knows that the construction industry has been in the doldrums for many years. The other thing that was talked about today was non-cancerous. I think we need to be real about what non-cancerous means, among them the central nervous system. And also about Bill Allman talking about PM 2.5, very important. The stacks were removed in 1981 when the kiln was rebuilt. I would think that it's fully amortized by now, and they should be held accountable to the modified plant status. For far too long, BAAQMD has given Lehigh Southwest a regulatory carte blanche, while the public has been given the illusion of effective and safe regulation. They're not alone. The EPA violation from the 1990s remains unresolved. BAAQMD recently admitted that in 2005, the plant fumigated our community upwards of 1,400 pounds of mercury. This is 16 times the suggested EPA limits, and actual numbers are believed to be higher. These numbers have never been publicized. In spite of frequent visits, BAAQMD only recently noticed unpermitted activity with synthetic gypsum, which is an innocuous name for toxic waste from coal-fired plants. This new air permit intends to allow for more of this additive created from capturing flue waste from coal-fired plants. I would urge limits be placed on this toxic constituents of this money-saving additive. While we are breathing somewhat easier with some added equipment in place, I do have concerns. First, the numbers are skewed because the operator is currently using imported limestone, which is lower in sulfur and mercury than our local toxic limestone. So please look at the numbers, what they would be using the local toxic limestone. In addition, it appears that HRA's numbers have been skewed to avoid notification limits. Second, BAAQMD has ignored pleas from local city councils requesting more stringent standards. We must weigh the overall cost of this polluter and instead of the desires of the stockholders of Heidelberg Cement. It's unfortunate that they've got bad limestone there, but that's their problem, not ours. Step up, please, impose more stringent standards. You can do better than the EPA. And finally, violations have far too long been followed up with meaningless reprimands. Please follow up with meaningful, swift, and actionable enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Del Campari, followed by Kathy Helgerson.
Hello. I had a lot of things to say, but first of all, I want to say that I'm really disappointed that we only have 2 minutes while Lehigh had over 20 minutes to speak. It seems that Lehigh, has a lot more influence than we do. They're meeting with you guys all the time. We have just this brief amount of time to interact with the board and the district. It's very difficult for us to go over to San Francisco on a regular basis like they do as part of their job, and I think that's completely unfair, and it's kind of shameful that even our 2 elected representatives don't get to speak as long as Lehigh does about their very valid concerns, and I'm very sorry that happened. I want to mention, Barry asked me to mention, he wasn't able to speak long enough to say that in Germany, the 2 Lehigh plants there, one releases 24 pounds of mercury per year, and another one 77 pounds of mercury per year, which is a lot less than what they're releasing here. A lot of the health risk assessments, they're not based on the maximum production. I mean, they're skewed for many reasons, as well as the fact that for quite some time, they were importing limestone from British Columbia, which is a lot lower in mercury. So a lot of that data is skewed because for a short while, they were not using their very high mercury-containing limestone. Mercury, as you probably know, is a persistent toxin. It does not degrade, it does not go away. Right now, our creek, Permanente Creek, as well as San Francisco Bay and Stevens Creek are all mercury poisoned. You cannot eat fish from there safely. And they're proposing to continue releasing mercury at extremely high levels. So it's not going away. It's already a problem. How can we release more mercury at high levels when we already have a problem? Thank you.
Thank you.
Please let the next speaker speak longer, please.
Kathy Helgerson.
Okay. Oops. Well, I want to ask, where were you on Friday? You should have been here. Worst day of the week for pollution is Friday. All week they've been open, 24/7. You couldn't see the foothills. You couldn't breathe. Your eyes were burning. Your throat was burning. I'm riding on the freeway, and it's horrid. This goes on all the time. Spare the air days, horrible. They don't shut down. Our summer is going to be a nightmare. I am waiting to more people on a grassroots effort come to you screaming about the hell that we have to live through. I'm tired of it. I've reported. Bay Area will not even cite them anymore. They have over $200,000 of penalties that they've paid Hanson and Lehigh. No one's registered that. They don't even try to do on-the-fence testing. Buena Vista Park, they refuse to put the monitor up on the hill because they have no generator. They don't want to use a generator. They said there's no electricity. That's a lie. I work day and night on this with the EPA, the water boards, the districts. Everyone knows me. All of my advocates know me. We have been going over this and over this. I am tired. I am ill from this. Our children, their lives are at stake here. My son's friend, 22-year-old, cancer. He lives 3 miles from this place. What do we have to do? Do we all have to get cancer before you can open your eyes and do something about this nightmare that we live here in? We don't need the cement plant. There's 10 of them in California, 10 cement plants. Heidelberg has 2,000 of them worldwide. 58,000 people. They're strong. We're fighting them. We're a small group of people here. What are you going to do when we start mobilizing and we're on the street, grassroots, thousands of us? There will be, I guarantee it. And you will be held accountable, and that includes Liz over here, excuse me. All right, don't defend Lehigh. Don't support them. Do you realize what you're doing to our children, and our lives are at stake here? Stop this harassment of the public with this pollution.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
And look at the petroleum coke coming out of there, too. It's
Thank you.
radioactive.
So that's the last speaker card I have. At this time, I assume, do you have any wrap-up comments that you want to make, Jack, about the schedule?
Mr. Chairman, we've been working on this proposal for literally, certainly over the last probably 18 months. And what we believe we have for you and will have for you for your consideration in September is a balanced, very health protective measure that we believe will reduce mercury, NOx, and PM emissions appropriately. You've heard concerns from the company that we shouldn't include the mercury standard, and we think we should. The equipment is there. We believe that the mercury levels will be appropriately reduced as a result of the implementation of those controls, but the fact is the rule needs to reference that and have it in that in it actually to make sure that that's enforceable and mercury levels are kept appropriately down. You've also heard concerns by the community that we don't go far enough, and we think we've actually pushed pretty tough on this facility, and we have a very good cost-effective proposal. All that being said, the staff will be working on this throughout the summer. There'll be additional opportunities for the community and the company to comment to us, and you'll hear all that as part of the proposal before you. I said earlier September 19th. It might be the 5th, actually. As we looked ahead, there might be quite a bit on the 19th agenda, so we'll be prepared and ready for your consideration on the 5th of September with this proposal.
Great. All right. Dr. Garner?
Yeah, thank you, Jack. Can you just comment on the written materials that we've received? How will the staff evaluate them, and how will the public receive our input, or the staff's input on the materials that we've been given today?
So, Director Gardner, we'll take this as comments on the rule, and we'll make sure that it is responded to as part of the record for the proposal, including the desk and all the other information that's been provided to you today.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, we're adjourning over to the shuttle buses to the parking lot. Some are going to go, some are not going to go, and the public is invited. And at this point, otherwise, we're also adjourned to the June 6th meeting in San Francisco. We thank everybody for coming. Again, this is not the last opportunity to hear from the public.